Learning how to speak Brazilian Portuguese is way easier than you think. Firstly, you don't need to know all the conjugations, you don't need to know all the grammatical rules, and you definitely don't need to know 5,000 words before having a conversation. Let's be honest, in your mother tongue, how many words do you use on a daily basis? Now think about it for a second. Why would you need to know more words in your target language, Portuguese, than you do in your mother tongue, English? Right, you don't. Which leads me to the first thing I'd like to discuss in this video. You don't need to know everything before speaking, you just need to start speaking. Now, although I didn't wait a long time before having my first conversation in Brazilian Portuguese, I tried to cram in so much before that conversation, and in hindsight it was silly. It simply wasn't necessary. You need to understand the basics and have a grasp of what to say in a basic conversation, but you don't need to know everything before speaking, and the only way you're going to get better at speaking is by speaking. So prepare yourself with necessary vocabulary, try to understand the basics, but start to speak as soon as possible, because the only way you're going to get better is through practicing. Think about it for a second. If you spend all your time practicing grammar, conjugations, and things from a textbook, how is that really going to help you in the real world? Especially when in the real world, people who speak do not follow the rules that you're going to learn in half of these textbooks. So trust me when I say you need to start speaking as early as possible, because if not, you're going to end up paying for it and you'll sound a bit like a gringo or a freshie, and you don't want that. You want your Portuguese to sound as seamless as possible, and the best way to do that is by starting to speak early on alongside your other study methods. So get out your comfort zone and speak to people as early as possible. It's the only way you're going to get better. Remember, in order for you to be able to speak, you have to speak. I know it sounds intuitive, but trust me, it's the only way forward. Now, some of you may be wondering, who are you to be giving us advice? Pois é, eu sou Patrício e aprendi português do Brasil por conta própria. Na verdade, aprendi em só 3 meses. Vou deixar o link para o vídeo onde mostro o meu processo aqui. Mas, dizendo isso, acho que tenho a experiência suficiente para falar do tema. Agora, vamos falar da segunda coisa que eu gostaria de ter sabido antes de aprender português. Vamos lá. As a Spanish speaker, knowing Spanish will trip you up. And this is because the two languages are so similar. I've discussed this topic in another video, which I'll link up here. But in essence, when you're searching for a word, sometimes the Spanish word may pop out when speaking Portuguese. The opposite is also true. Now, you can hear it with things like borracha, which in Spanish means drunk, but in Portuguese, it means rubber. I once said something like, vou correr o ônibus, when I should have said, vou pegar o ônibus. I'm going to get the bus. And that's because correr is the take version in Spanish, as in I'm going to take the bus, voy a coger el autobús, or voy a tomar el autobús. But it's not unusual for you to make that mistake, especially if you speak the two languages. Having said that, if you make these mistakes, most people will understand you. But if you want to improve your Portuguese and sound like a native, then you need to nip these things in the bud early on. What I would suggest is keeping the two languages separate when you're learning them. Try not to mix the two. Try not to mix the two mental spaces. I know it's difficult because of how similar words are, but trust me, when you're studying the two, study them in isolation. Now, the third thing I wish I knew is how difficult the pronunciation of R can be for English speakers. Take a word like Rio or Rio de Janeiro. You'll hear something closer to Rio de Janeiro, Rio de Janeiro, or a word like car. You'll hear something closer to carro, carro. So that R at the beginning of a word is pronounced like an H, and the RR in the middle of a word is pronounced like an H. One way I got better at this is by writing H instead of R when I was writing in Portuguese. That way, I remembered to pronounce it as such. Let me know if you guys have done anything similar down in the comments below. Whilst there, if you're enjoying this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, the fourth thing I'd like to discuss is that grammar in textbooks is nothing like grammar in real life. Trust me. So this one can really mess you up in real life. I had a friend once say to me, nos vai. Not a gente vai or nos vamos. Nos vai. You will never learn that in a textbook. And this is why speaking early on to people is a good thing. Now, I'm not saying that's the right way to do things. You can say a gente vai or nos vamos, which I think would be better. That's what I would say. I would never say nos vai, but he did so. And that taught me something, that people in the real world don't always follow textbook grammar. This is something that you'll only pick up speaking to people. And this is why I encourage you to speak early on, because trust me when I say grammar rules in textbooks don't really line up to how people speak in the real world. And another thing you'll notice is how things are written in books, newspapers, magazines, doesn't always line up with how people speak in the real world. And this is also true across the board with any language, but I think it's even more pronounced with Brazilian Portuguese. There's such a disconnect to the way people write formally, and speak day to day. Let me know if you've experienced this too, but this is something that definitely stood out to me. Now, the fifth thing I wish I knew before learning Portuguese is that nasal vowels are going to take a long time to master. Even today, I still haven't mastered them. Take a word like coração or tradição, that CAO, that sound is very difficult to make, especially for English speakers. Even something as basic as now, we would just say no, right? But that now and trying to get that nasal sound out to sound like a native is very difficult. I'm a lot better now than before, still not where I want to be, but it's something that had I known earlier, I would have spent a lot more time trying to perfect, but I'm getting there little by little. What would be interesting to know is what you guys think about this topic. Let me know down in the comments below. Would you add anything to the list? Let me know. Are you going through the same thing? Let me know. If you enjoyed this video, go and check out my other video where I taught myself how to speak Brazilian Portuguese in just 10 days. That was the first experiment before I became fluent after 3 months. If you like languages, culture, and accents, I've got a newsletter where I discuss this stuff every month. I'm going to link it down in the description. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it to somebody else who may find it interesting. As always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I shall see you in the next one. Peace.